Good morning.
Good morning.
I know it may have said that Daryl was preaching on your bulletin, but I'm not Daryl. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jalen Redburn. I currently serve as the youth minister here. And for the next couple of weeks, I have offered up to Daryl. I'm going to be preaching us a little sermon series for the book of Hebrews. Just think it might be nice for Daryl to have some time with the new baby who is coming any hour now. So be praying for Daryl, and then we'll go ahead and get started here today. So, in Los Angeles, California, there are many different attractions that someone can visit in the area. Can go anywhere from escape rooms, museums, even probably tour some movie studios in the area. But for some reason, if you go to Hollywood, one of the things that seems to be on everyone's list of things to do is this little sidewalk. A random sidewalk filled with all of these stars in Hollywood. It's the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And it's really an interesting thing because on the Walk of Fame, we have thousands, in fact, over 2,700 stars line this 1.3 mile long sidewalk on Hollywood Boulevard. Each of these stars representing a star in the entertainment industry. Someone who has been a great influence on entertainment or has done great things in the eyes of the Walk of Fame. And so I thought it might be interesting if we would do a little bit of a quiz. So I'm going to see what all you guys know about the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I have 3 questions, and we're going to go through each of these. And I'm going to read each question twice. And whenever I say the answer that you think is right, I want you to raise your hand. So first one, there are a number of stars who have multiple stars in the Walk of Fame, but only one has 5 different stars. Which of these stars has 5 stars on the Walk of Fame?
Bob Hope.
Bob Hope, Tony Martin, or Gene Autry?
Bob Hope.
Okay. Now I'm going to say it one more time and raise your hand if you think that's the answer. Okay. Bob Hope. Who thinks Bob Hope has 5 stars? Tony Martin or Gene Autry?
He should be.
You know what? You're right. It is Gene Autry, actually. So Gene, he has 5 different Hollywood stars. One for radio, recording, motion picture, television, and live performance. He has a star for each one of those. Okay, and then, yeah, that's Gene Autry's star. So now, what is the largest group of people who are represented by 1 star? Is it the Harlem Globetrotters, the Apollo 11 mission, or the Munchkins? Okay, so I'm going to say it one more time and raise your hand.
Apollo 11 include Houston?
Apollo, I don't believe. I don't know for sure. Yes, it does. So, is it the Harlem Globetrotters? Raise your hand if you think the Harlem Globetrotters. Is it the Apollo 11 mission? Or is it the Munchkins? Yes, it is the Munchkins. The Munchkins have their own Hollywood star. And the interesting fact, so the Munchkins in The Wizard of Oz were played by 124 adult dwarves and 12 child actors. Wow. That's how many people it took to make the Munchkins that we see in the movie. And you can see some of them whenever they got their star in that picture. Okay, final one. Which of these 4 fictional characters does not have their own star? Is it Kermit the Frog, Mickey Mouse, Godzilla, or E.T.? Okay, so raise your hand if you think Kermit the Frog does not have a star. Do you think does Mickey Mouse not have a star? What about Godzilla? A lot of people think Godzilla doesn't have a star. Okay, what about E.T.? You 2 are right. E.T. actually does not have a star, and you can see here pictures of Kermit with his star, Mickey Mouse getting his star, and Godzilla getting a star for all the Godzilla movies. So the Hollywood Walk of Fame is quite interesting. It's fun to look at. But did you know that the Bible has its own version of a Walk of Fame? the Hall of Fame, if you will. If you look in Hebrews 11, you will find what a chapter that has been nicknamed to be the Hall of Faith. In the chapter of this book of chapter, this chapter of Hebrews has many different characters that are mentioned from the Old Testament. And the writer goes through and he's trying to acknowledge many of the Old Testament characters for their different acts of faith that they have. And throughout these next couple of weeks, we're going to try to just look at a couple of these characters from the Hall of Faith and understand why they are mentioned in Hebrews 11. And so today, it seems most appropriate that we start off with Abraham. Abraham is someone, he is mentioned probably the most in the Hall of Faith, as he has about 7 or 8 verses dedicated to him in the Hall of Faith. So today, if you would, we're going to be looking in Genesis chapter 22 to understand why Abraham is part of the Hall of Faith. So, at this part in Abraham's life, in Genesis 22, here's a few things for you to know. At this point, Abraham and Sarah have given birth to Isaac together, despite Sarah being past childbearing age, in her words, and Abraham being 100 years old. Through Isaac, God has promised Abraham that Abraham is going to have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. And Abraham would be the father of great nations because of Isaac. This brings us to Genesis 22. And we start off Genesis 22 with God speaking to Abraham. And God tells Abraham, "Take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains on which I tell you." Wait, what? Didn't just a couple of chapters ago God tell Abraham that through Isaac he was going to have great descendants? He was going to have nations come from his descendants? But God wants Abraham to sacrifice Isaac? It doesn't make sense to the average person, but Abraham listens. And we see in the next verses, Abraham, being the man he was, doesn't question God for a second. Which, for me, seems quite hard to comprehend. Because if I was told this, even without being told that I was going to have great descendants through Isaac, if I was told, "Hey, can you go and sacrifice your son?" then I would kind of, very quickly at least, give it a double take. Question like, "Wait, really, God? You want me to go sacrifice my son?" But no. Abraham gets up early the next morning, cuts wood for the burnt offering, saddles up his donkeys, gathers his son and 2 young men, and they go on a 3-day journey. And I can only imagine how long those 3 days felt. I mean, can you just imagine Abraham and Isaac walking along the trail for 3 long days, having whatever conversation that they're having? And I have to think Abraham in the back of his head this entire journey, he's like, "What am I going to do when I get there? I have to sacrifice my son. I have to put my son up on this altar and give him to God, literally. What am I going to do? How do I make this easy?" It almost reminds me of if you've ever had to dump a girl and you take them on a date and you have to dump her at the end of the date, so you're trying to figure out the entire date. How am I going to dump this girl without hurting her feelings too bad? This was probably what Abraham felt, but 50 times more. It must have been hard to make this 3-day journey. But Abraham doesn't. Abraham trusts God and makes this 3-day journey with Isaac so that at the end of this journey, Abraham can sacrifice him. So Abraham and Isaac, they travel this 3-day journey. And they get to the mountain where the sacrifice is going to take place. And Abraham looks to the 2 young men he brought along. And he tells them, "Stay back, stay with the donkeys." And Abraham and Isaac, they carry up the wood They carry up the knife. They carry up the flint and steel or whatever they used to start the fire. And they start walking up the hill. They start walking up this mountain, Abraham and Isaac together. And Isaac starts looking around. He starts looking around and he realizes, wait, hey, Dad, Father Abraham, where's the sheep? Where's the oxen? Where's the animal we're going to sacrifice? And I have to imagine, as Isaac is asking this question, me having gone on long journeys before, I'm just remembering many times where, my family, we travel about half an hour out of town, and my mom looks back and realizes, oh, I left my phone at home. Can we turn back and go back home? I have to imagine this might be what Isaac is thinking, like, oh no, are we going to have to make this whole 3-day journey again because we left the animal back home again? But no, Abraham knows that their sacrifice is right there in Isaac. So Abraham tells Isaac, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And that's good enough for Isaac. So they finish up the trek, go up the mountain, and they get to the top of the mountain, and it becomes real. Abraham has to sacrifice his son now. And Scripture doesn't tell us how Abraham got Isaac tied up onto the altar or whatever. We read that Abraham built up the altar with the wood and the stones and whatever else he had. And he built this altar, and he somehow got Isaac on the altar. But we don't know how. And I don't know if maybe Isaac just was a weak young man, and somehow Abraham, this 100-year-old man, probably even older at this point, just brute forced his way through, or what he did. But Abraham gets Isaac onto the altar. And Abraham now is going to have to sacrifice his son. He looks down at the altar, and there's his son, who he has loved and cherished for years. And he has to sacrifice him for God. God has told him, sacrifice your son to me. Take him up this mountain and offer him as a burnt offering. And Abraham, out of his faith, is willing to comply. Abraham trusts God so much that he is going to sacrifice his one and only son. And so Abraham, he raises up his knife, and he's getting ready to bring down the knife to sacrifice his one and only son, when all of a sudden Abraham hears calling out, Abraham, Abraham, stop. And it's the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord calls out to Abraham and says, do not stretch out your hand against this lad, and do nothing to him. For I know now that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And in that moment, Abraham lifts up his eyes. Abraham lifts up his eyes and sees a ram caught in the bushes nearby. And Abraham decides that that's going to be their new sacrifice. Abraham goes over and gets the ram, and him and Isaac together sacrifice this ram. And I don't know what those conversations must have been like between Abraham and Isaac as they're sacrificing that ox or ram that was in the bushes. Or what that conversation must have been like on that 3-day journey back. Like, Dad, what were you going to do to me? You were going to sacrifice me? But Abraham trusted God. No matter how hard it must have been, Abraham trusted God with his one and only son and was willing to go to the extent of sacrificing him. But he knew that God would be there. God had a plan, and he trusted that God would take care of him. We read in Hebrews, and whenever Abraham is mentioned in the Hall of Faith, we read that Abraham trusts God so much to the extent that he's willing to believe that God was going to be able to resurrect his son if he had to. We can understand that Abraham wasn't willing to just put him up on the altar. Abraham was trusting God so much, he was going to kill and sacrifice his son to God. I can't fathom trusting God that much. Just being able to take your one and only son up onto the altar and sacrifice him. But Abraham had that faith in God. Abraham trusted him that much. And because of Abraham's faith, God takes care of him. Later we see the angel come back to Abraham, and the angel tells Abraham that because of his faith, God's promise to Abraham is going to be upheld. Because Abraham was willing to sacrifice his one and only son, God is going to make Abraham and his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Which I think any of us who have been to a sandy beach can say, there's a lot of sand. And that sand, for some reason, always gets stuck to you as you're walking out, and you have to take it all the way home. But there's so much sand, it doesn't even matter. God is going to make Abraham's descendants so numerous, it's unable to count. We now sing songs about Father Abraham because of Abraham's faith. Abraham trusted God so much. But it's hard to trust God. It's hard to trust God when everything else in the world is just chaos. It's hard to trust God when you look around and you see all this stuff going on and you don't know what you're supposed to do. I remember my senior year of high school, March of 2020. I'm sure amongst all of us, we hear March of 2020 and we can connect the dots. March of 2020, my senior year of high school. It's when COVID starts to hit. We start off the month, and probably like March 7th, I go to a speech competition. Put in a lot of work and managed to get second in the competition. Get this shiny medal, and it means I get to go to state. I get to go to the state competition because I put in all this work. Did all this work to be able to become a good speaker and to compete at the best of the best, and I'm going to go to state because I got second place at regionals. Week later, St. Patrick's Day. And COVID has all of a sudden just sprouted up in America. St. Patrick's Day comes, and there wasn't that much pinching going on. And it wasn't because everyone was wearing green, it's because everyone felt green. And all of a sudden, we hear over the loudspeaker, "Seniors, please come to the auditorium during your 4th hour period." So all the seniors go to the area. They go to the classroom go to the auditorium for 4th hour. And we're told that that was going to be our last day of school for the next couple of weeks. We're told that we're going to be sent home, and for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be having a just break. And we'll come back after spring break, and everything's going to be fine and dandy. Wait 2 weeks, and we'll come back, and everything's going to be great. But almost all of the seniors there knew, deep down, that was our last day in that building. That was our last day as high schoolers. We would later go on to not get to have those state speech competitions that we looked forward to so much. We would go on to have graduation months and months later. Many other students didn't even have graduation. We would go on to miss out on so much during that year. Just like I'm missing out on my mic, apparently. We would go on to miss out on so much. But we also gained a lot more. We gained a lot of hard life experience in those moments. And many of us learned how to trust God whenever everything else that we had put all of our hard work into was gone. All those speech tournaments that we put all of our hard work into, it didn't matter anymore. They were gone. I missed out on going to a state speech competition that I looked forward to all through high school. I missed out on choir competitions. I missed out on my senior play. And I'm not the only one. But throughout that whole experience, I learned how to trust God in the midst of chaos. I learned how to trust God when nothing seems to be going my way. And to recognize that even though I may be missing out on stuff, God still has a plan. And I still need to trust him because there's stuff that he's working out that he's going to use me. That very day, St. Patrick's Day, whenever I was told that I would not be coming back to school, during that auditorium meeting, my grandmother and her husband got in a car accident. They got into a car wreck on the highway. And we weren't sure if they were going to be okay afterwards. My grandmother is fine. She was fine. Came out of it with a couple bumps and bruises, but her husband had to be taken to the hospital in Columbia nearby. Her husband had to be 30 minutes away from her whenever she, after the accident, couldn't really drive herself. God used me. I got out of school that very next day, and I wasn't sitting at home doing nothing. I was out of school, and I got to take my grandmother to see her husband in the hospital. I got to take her so she could be with her husband and care for him. And her husband, she turned out, they both are fine now. But throughout that week, after we got out of school, I got to make 3 trips back and forth to Columbia so my grandmother could see her husband in the hospital. So my grandmother could go to the doctor herself. And if it wasn't for me being out of school, I don't know how she would have gotten there. Also, at that time, I was working at a nursing home. I was an activities aide. I was the kid who got to go around and call bingo numbers for fun on a daily basis. I really loved that job. But when COVID hit, that job changed a lot. No longer were we doing bingo games in the center of the cafeteria. Everyone was shut off to their rooms. But I was able to be there and be alive. You know, I was considered an essential worker, so while everyone else in town was at home, being quarantined, I was getting to go to work every day and just love on the residents. I got to go into rooms and play card games with different residents in the nursing home and just talk to them, learn who they were, learn their stories, and make connections with them. I had to trust God that he was putting me in the right places. I had to trust God that even though I may be missing out on all the things that I planned on doing my senior year of high school, he had a bigger plan. I had to trust God that he was going to use me to make an influence on people's lives. Trusting God is hard, especially when everything else in your life seems like it's going wrong. But our God is a God we can trust. We can trust God because we know God loves us, he cares for us, and he has a plan for us. God takes care of those who trust him. And you know what? We can trust God in the midst of everything. God is not like Daryl asking for $300 in Apple gift cards, who we probably shouldn't trust. Those of you who got the spam text message know what I'm talking about. God is the God that we can trust when everything is going wrong, who isn't going to try to cheat us out of our money. God is going to use us to help further his kingdom. Throughout the whole chaos of my senior year of high school, where I lost so much, I also gained so much. And that's because I trusted God. I trusted that God would use me. And God has used me in that year and in the years since. Abraham had to trust God in the midst of chaos. Abraham had to trust God in the midst of being told he had to sacrifice his one and only son. And while it was hard, Abraham trusted God and he did it. Abraham took action. Abraham didn't just be like, okay, sure. Abraham actually went and did it. He took action. Because trusting God isn't just sitting there and listening. Trusting God is also taking action. Trusting God means going to those people who need help and saying, God, I don't know what you want me to do, but I'm here. I'm willing to help. Trusting God is praying with someone whenever they're about to go and get chemotherapy in the hospital. Trusting God is trusting in Him no matter what is going on. Myself, on Friday, I got to go and get my wisdom teeth taken out in a surgery. And I'm trusting God twofold in that. I'm trusting, number one, that He has me safe and sound no matter what happens in that surgery. And number two, I'm trusting that God doesn't give my wife too much blackmail on me through the time where I'm loopy from the different drugs that I'm given. It can be kind of hard to trust God, but sometimes it can be easy. And I don't know what each and every one of our situations are like this week, but I know there's stuff going on in our lives that we have to trust God with. Whether it be trusting God that He's going to help out and bring students to Sunday night youth tonight, or trusting God that everything's going to be okay with my family in the hospital. Whatever it may be, God is able to take care of those who trust Him. All we have to do is trust in Him and follow God's lead. Dear God, thank you for today. I thank you so much for allowing everyone to be here and being able to just hear your word. God, I pray for each and every one of us, and I pray you help us to trust you in the midst of everything going on in our lives. God, I don't know the circumstances of everyone here at this church, but I pray that you will be here for us and love on us. And I pray you help us to draw nearer to you and trust in you. God, I just pray that everything goes well this week for all of us, and you help us to have a week where we can shine your light. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.